Well, it's gotten me thinking quite a bit, and I'm happy to say lots and lots of thinkers around the world and doers around the world. What is a sustainable city? What is a city that embodies the goals of prosperity, fairness, and environmental sustainability? What will our cities look like as we proceed further in the 21st century? I think that it's worthwhile to identify the main pillars of sustainable cities going forward, how we should plan, design cities, what kind of layout, what kind of infrastructure systems we should be aiming for so that our cities are sustainable in the sense of combining economic, social, and environmental objectives. There are 10 ideas that I find to be very helpful in thinking about the future of cities and that I hope can be useful as guideposts as the big cities in Asia, the rapidly growing cities, are thinking in Africa, what do we do? How do we get organized? And as our cities in the United States and Europe, often cities that have been around for 1,000 years and more, also take crucial steps for 21st century sustainable development. Well, one of the core challenges that we're going to face is climate change. Climate change is a pervasive risk for humanity. The core answer that is recognized by scientists and engineers and embodied in the Paris Climate Agreement is that we need to move to a new low-carbon energy system. And since cities are the places where we use so much energy, whether it's in our residences or our commercial buildings or the transport, the automobiles in the streets of our cities, or the industrial production in our cities, we need to have energy systems that are safe. And the first three pillars that I identify in my own thinking about sustainable cities really revolve around this need for clean, green, modern, efficient energy systems that are climate safe. So one simple idea that I think is a powerful one, I think it will work for New York City and for many cities around the world, is that our cities need to go all electric. What do I mean by that? Well, I mean wherever we use energy right now, whether it's the boilers and the furnaces in New York City that heat our buildings, or the internal combustion engines under the hoods of our automobiles, that's burning fossil fuel. That's those current energy uses, the boilers and the furnaces and the automobiles are releasing massive amounts of carbon dioxide into the air, warming the planet. So if we're going to have climate safety, if we're going to achieve the Paris Climate Agreement, we need to go all electric so that instead of burning heating oil in the furnaces to heat the buildings of New York City or others, we are going to heat our buildings electrically using heat pumps and other advanced technologies that have been developed and reduced tremendously in cost. And instead of driving in vehicles powered by the internal combustion engine, the way that the billion cars and trucks around the world are powered, I believe that much sooner than later, we're going to, almost all of us, be driving electric vehicles or other zero-emission vehicles, basically in an all-electric economy. So I think of New York City, where we burn a lot of fossil fuels, and I see that our city could become all electric within the next 2 or 3 decades through systematic action. And this brings the second pillar to make that transformation meaningful, and that is that the electricity itself that powers our cities should be clean, green. So it's not only to make our cars electric, but to charge our cars on a power grid that is run on wind power, solar power, hydroelectric power, in some places nuclear energy, but power generation that is not releasing carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Now, the third pillar that makes this work efficiently, that makes the cities prosperous and effective in an all-electric city, is that our transmission systems and our infrastructure generally has to be smart. What does smart mean? Smart means really deploying the information technology, the broadband internet access, the sophisticated monitoring and metering systems that allow energy to be highly efficient, that can help guide modern transport so that we're not sitting in traffic jams, that can make our appliances turn on and off in line with the load that is and the capacity of the energy system, and other aspects of being smart in what is sometimes now called the Internet of Things, where each appliance, whether it's our refrigerators or our automobiles or our computers or our solar panels on our buildings, our solar panels that are going to be built right into the windows of our buildings soon enough, are essentially communicating with each other through the internet so that they're operating as an efficient and effective system. So first three pillars, all electric, clean, green electricity, and smart grids that connect these new devices and electric-powered vehicles and appliances in a highly efficient way. The fourth pillar of a modern sustainable city is that it's going to have to be an innovative city, a city that is remaking its technologies in line with the cutting-edge information systems, and also is generating new jobs by helping to develop new industries based on the new renewable energy or new electric vehicles or new applications that are managing our city's infrastructure. Where does an innovation city come from? Well, one key part of that, as I'll emphasize in just a few minutes, is from our universities. Our institutions of higher education, working together with government and business, have a huge role to play, not only in helping us make a transformation to environmental sustainability, but also in generating new businesses, new jobs. And universities have become, in a way, the great incubators of entrepreneurship, new startup companies based on high tech that are often now growing around the campuses of universities because we're in a knowledge economy and in the midst of an information revolution. A fifth aspect of our cities is that they should be healthful and pleasant. Now, 20th century cities were cities of the automobile, just like 19th century cities were the cities of horse-drawn carriages. And old cities have streets that are narrow and mazes because they were largely walking cities. Cities of the 19th century perhaps have grand boulevards for horse-drawn carriages, whether it's Paris or the great urban street grid of New York City. 20th century cities, those that grew up in the 20th century, like Los Angeles or my hometown of Detroit, Michigan, were really automobile cities. And the way we got around is you wanted to go somewhere, get in a car, drive, get out, get back in the car, drive someplace else. And we developed cities that were sprawls, that had suburbs often 10 or 15 miles away from the central business district, tremendous amount of reliance on commuting, usually commuting in our family-owned cars, and relatively little walking, actually, because you'd go from parking lot to parking lot. Well, it turns out this is just wrong on so many dimensions. Of course, it's highly energy using, all this driving. It's contributed massively to the greenhouse gas emissions. It's been heavily polluting. It creates a major financial problems for families that absolutely have to own a couple of automobiles in order to be able to function and get to work. Well, it turns out this kind of automobile city is just unhealthy. You sit. When you get in the car, you sit. You drive. You get to the office, you sit. You get back in the car, you sit. You get home, you sit. And that kind of sedentary lifestyle, it turned out, was one of the contributing factors to what is essentially an obesity epidemic in the high-income countries and a big health toll associated with that. And also, it's just not fun to be in traffic jams all the time. People report that their commuting time is typically not among their happiest times of the day. So there is really a wake-up call that has led urban residents around the world, young people who are returning from suburbs to the center cities, city planners, city designers, to come back to the idea of more densely settled cities where you can walk, you can ride your bicycle, you don't have to get in the car all the time, and where our streets are mixed use, meaning that you have residences, you have shops, you have businesses, all together in a highly varied urban setting that just makes cities fun, diverse, happy, and healthful places to live. So we are returning to more densely settled cities, not the automobile cities of the past, but densely settled cities, and many cities around the world are reclaiming their common areas for walking and for bicycles, taking them back from the automobile, and really inviting people back from the urban and suburban sprawl back to higher density living within our cities. A sixth pillar that's absolutely vital and crucial is physical security. There are tremendous violence in rural and urban areas in many parts of the world. Cities can be anonymous and dangerous, but with the good policing, good lighting, good monitoring of people and the movements of people, cities can also be very, very safe as well. But cities need to plan for physical safety, and one of the aspects of social inclusion is to make sure that cities overcome or never develop those pockets of high poverty and instability, maybe substance abuse and drug trafficking, which can make them very difficult and dangerous places, infested, gang-related with a tremendous amount of violence. So physical security, which is emphasized in SDG 16, peaceful and inclusive societies, is of course a core pillar of a 21st century sustainable city. A seventh point that is very interesting is that information technology is making possible a different kind of business environment and a different kind of economy, more fundamentally, sometimes called the share economy. The idea of a share economy is, why do I want to own a car when I can just hire a car for the short term to take me where I want to go and not have an expensive vehicle of my ownership sitting 95% of the time in a parking lot or in a garage and requiring very heavy expenditures of insurance and other expenses. A share economy means that for our physical infrastructure, whether it's our residences, which can be rented rather than owned, or our vehicles, which can be rented for 5 minutes at a time as we go about our urban activity, but don't have to be owned by the household, we can have a more inclusive society in which people aren't burdened by the need to save massively to make major capital investments for services that they can much more easily achieve by essentially sharing those services, whether it's through short-term or long-term rental markets or shared vehicles and even the kind of self-driving vehicles that I'll talk about in just a moment. An eighth pillar for me is to put smart systems to work, not only connecting the devices, the Internet of Things, which I mentioned earlier, but also connecting us with each other in ways that really can save our time, save our wear and tear, and give us more leisure time and more time not having to be in commutes. So I call it e-everything, e-commerce, so that we're not driving to and from the mall, e-finance, so that we're not driving or even necessarily walking to and from the bank or the ATM machines, e-governance, so that we don't have to go halfway across the city to renew our driver's license or to register to vote or even to vote itself, because voting increasingly will be an online activity. E-everything, in my view, can be a means for social inclusion as well, because with internet costs so low, I believe that we will have more digital unity than digital divide, that everybody will be able to obtain critical governance services or commercial services or financial services at very low cost by being e-services. The ninth point that is key is that our cities are essentially what are sometimes called metropolitan areas, meaning that the relevant social and economic and environmental definition of the city is not the legal boundaries of a particular administrative unit, but the much broader boundaries that may include many cities, villages, all together in what is one social, economic, environmental, and infrastructural agglomeration. New York City, in its narrow definition, has 8 million people. But if you add in all of the cities around New York City, both in New York itself and in New Jersey, this is an area that includes about 25 million people, and that's the relevant metric if we're thinking about the energy system, the transport needs, the financing and tax systems and so forth, so that there's not arbitrariness if a person lives just on one side of a line versus another side of a line in terms of their taxes or the quality of their schools and so on. So inclusive financial bases that are metropolitan scale, inclusive infrastructure so that it's not an urban environment where rich people have great transport and poor people can't get to and from work except in horrendously long, difficult, costly, and unpleasant ways, is a core part of true inclusive, sustainable development. And of course, the 10th point that I think will bear on all of us, and I'll emphasize this in just a moment when we look in a little bit more detail at these pillars, is environmental resilience. Now, here's the basic point. The Sustainable Development Goals call for environmental sustainability. They open our eyes to the fact that global warming could ruin the world economy and endanger us. They open our eyes to the fact that inadvertently we're destroying the habitats of millions of species and undermining biodiversity, life on the planet, and we need to stop that. But what's also true, and we have to take note, is that because of these adverse trends that have been underway for so long and the momentum of them, there's going to be a lot more environmental instability in the future, in the coming few decades than there has been in the past. We'll have more heat waves, more extreme storms, we'll have floods, we'll have droughts. Cities need to be resilient. They need to plan for this changing risk profile. And I'm going to point out where some of those risks are. So this is for me, a 10-point agenda for sustainable cities that starts with energy systems, makes them green, clean, green, smart. It goes to questions of innovation, of walkable, mixed-use cities, of our physical security, of the share economy and the e-economy, of the metropolitan base for solving problems, and of environmental resilience. But let's look just a little bit more deeply at some of these pillars so that we see what is really at stake.